Morning, please be seated. How are we feeling? We good? For those of you who have been going to church throughout the summer, you are very aware, and some others might not be as aware, that we have been every single Sunday this summer tracking the stories of the matriarchs and the patriarchs in Genesis. Yep. So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Rebecca, Leah, Rachel, all of the people. And this Sunday is the culmination story. This is the very last story of the matriarchs and the patriarchs. So welcome, you've made it. We will be moving into Exodus next. It's fitting, though, I think, that the very last piece of this puzzle, of this great narrative arc of swindling, tricking, betrayal, right? All of the things ends in reconciliation. So that's where we're going to hang out today. Unless you think somebody said to me maybe last week or the week before, like, but when are we going to get back to Jesus? Because I really like Jesus. And we've been talking a lot about, right, all of these messy, messy humans that came long before It's the same message, friends. So stick with us and see if you can kind of draw those parallels. We're going to start with the psalm. The first part of the psalm offered today. Oh, how good and pleasant it is when brethren, family, friends, communities, nations, right, peoples, tribes, when brethren live together in unity. Sounds so nice. Right? Doesn't that sound nice? Oh, how good and pleasant it is when we can all just get along, when we all like each other, when we're all one. That's where we are. So we're going to start today. Dan read today, and Dan, I'm going to out you, right? Dan is in theater, if you didn't figure that out, right? Directs theater and has been in theater for a long time. And so when I saw that he was reading today, I was like, oh, I wonder what he's going to do. Because this particular passage for me is just so fraught and wrought with emotion. Yeah. And Dan, you did a wonderful job, but there was no snot and there was no weeping and there was, right. So I want you to put yourselves in the midst of this scene, right? I am Joseph. I am Joseph. 3 words. I am Joseph. That's all he could get out. Now, this is after Joseph has said, out, everyone out, right? All of the people there from his from the office, right, if you will, all of the colleagues who are there, all of the people, everyone who is not one of these brothers, which nobody knows are his brothers yet, everybody get out, because he knew, right? He knew that he was not able to control what was about to come out of his body. Yeah? You all know this, right? The big ugly cry. Even those of you who tell me that you are not criers, right? You know what's coming. You know when it's bursting out. This is when, in my family, we go to the shower, right? We turn the fan on, we turn the shower on, we turn the radio on, like put on all of the things out there so nobody's going to hear the big ugly cry that just has to come out, right? The snot, the tears, all of the things. And honestly, if you had done that, like, but that's what I want you to imagine, right? He can only kind of just eke out these words. I am Joseph, right? And he sends everyone else out of the room, and guess what? They still hear him. They hear him in the next room. In fact, it says everyone in Pharaoh's household heard the outburst that comes out of Joseph. I am Joseph. Now, this is the brother that these men threw into a pit, sold to slave traders, right? The brother that they were assured they would never see again. And now, years after all of the treachery and the swindling and the imprisonment and the exile and all the things, right? Here he is, standing, weeping, sobbing in front of them. Are there any fans of the movie The Holiday in the house today? I said that and someone was like, Mr. Napkin Head? I was like, no, we're not doing Mr. Napkin Head. If you love the movie, you'll know what that, we're not doing Mr. Napkin Head, but we're going to talk about weeping. Jude Law is one of the primary characters in this movie. And Jude Law is trying to explain to a woman that he is wooing who claims that she never cries, that he, in fact, cries all of the time, right? I cry over everything and anything. And she said, no, you don't. He said, no, really, I'm a weeper. I'm a weeper. And so in my house, right, like sometimes we will just look at each other and say, right, I gotta go. I'm a weeper, right? I gotta go have my big ugly cry somewhere. Why does the weeping matter so much? Friends, Joseph hasn't simply survived what happened to him and survived all of these years of these terrible things. He's carried all of that with him. He didn't talk about it. People didn't know about it, right? But it's all in there. And so have his brothers. And so has their father, right? The family has lived for years inside a wound that nobody, not one of them, ever dealt with, ever talked about. Some of you know the author Marilyn Robinson, and she's wrote beautifully about this particular storyline in Genesis. And she imagines those years where nobody says anything and they're just living in and with this terrible brokenness. She says, Jacob never asking the question he was terrified to ask. The brothers never confessing what they had done. Everyone learning how to live around the silence. And then somehow that silence breaks, right? The floodgates open. There's weeping. I am Joseph. And suddenly there's a possibility that seemed totally impossible. Before the tears, the big, fat, ugly tears opened the way that words could not. Reconciliation. It wasn't open to them before this, but somehow just the embodiment of all of that pain and that grief and all of the things, right, comes rushing out. Now, I'm not saying that words aren't good. Words are great. We're Episcopalians. We love words. We especially love beautiful, pretty words, right? They make the world go round. And yet sometimes, especially in our brokenness, in our broken relationships, even in the broken relationships with ourselves, words don't work. And throughout Scripture, it is often not words, but some sort of embodied response that, right, opens those gates. Think about the prodigal son, right? When the prodigal son returns, dad does not stand on the hill and pontificate and tell him all the things that he did, that he wished he had done right, but all right, son, come. He just rushes out and embraces, right? Here we've got weeping. Think about all the times that you have wept. I was thinking about this as we were praying this morning. When I was in my 20s, I found myself in an Episcopal church for the very first time, had never stepped foot in an Episcopal church, to be frank, and knelt down, and I don't know what all came over me, but there I was, blubbering like a baby, just kneeling down in the middle of the prayers of the people, not because the words were beautiful or any of the things, but something opened and the floods opened. I have a dear friend right now who just lost her college roommate to cancer. And she said, is it weird that I just climbed in bed with her, right? And just held her and cried? No, it's not weird. That is our body doing the theology that sometimes doesn't come out of our mouths, but comes out in these emotions, right? In these times that break us. Madeleine L'Engle, who many of you know, is fascinated by our very strange human tendency, she says, to be fallible creatures who nevertheless insist upon our infallibility. Fallible creatures who nevertheless insist on our infallibility, right? We want to be right. We want to know, like, who's good, who's bad, who's in, who's out, right? We want to divide the world clearly into us and them. We want to be justified. And it is just that impulse, she claims, and I think she's right, that is at the root of so much of our brokenness, right? Because if I am absolutely right and infallible, and Betsy Edgeworth disagrees with me, well, guess what that makes Betsy? Totally fallible and wrong, right? And there's no way that Betsy and I are going to find our place together if I stay in this infallible place, right? There is no opportunity for reconciliation there. Reconciliation becomes impossible. And yet, this is why we love Scripture, like this whole narrative arc from Genesis, right? It reminds us with stories just like today's, filled with paradox and contradictions and failures and change and death and rebirth, all of these things, right? That this messiness, this stew of messiness, is what it means to be human, and that none of us yet are finished. I want to say that again, that not one person in this room is done yet. And neither is anybody else, right, that you come upon. So let's go back to, oh, how good and pleasant it is when brethren live together in unity, right? It is not a trite or sentimental saying. This is hard. This is the hard work of being a person of faith. Because we know, each and every single one of you here knows, right, how hard it is. We know families that have stopped speaking together. We know friendships that have ended, communities, nations divided by old wounds, right? We know what it is to love someone and not be able to reach them. And somewhere, and of this I am convinced in all of the work that I do, somewhere buried in each of us, even the ones kind of hardened by all of this, is the knowledge that we were actually made for reconciliation. We were made to be whole. We hunger for it. We ache for it. Because we're made to be in communion with God, in communion with one another, in communion with ourselves and our worst selves. This is why it's not just a virtue, this whole idea of forgiveness and reconciliation, right? It's something that is at the very heart of what it means to be human, and it is the very work of God and the church. And make no mistake, the church messes it up on like every minute, but it is still the work of the church. Jordan touched on this the last couple of times that she preached, and I just want to go there because I think she was absolutely right to go back to it. In this passage, friends, Joseph has all the power. He has all the cards. Nobody else has a card to play. He's got it all, right? His brothers are completely at his mercy. He could punish them. He could humiliate them. He could have them killed, right? He could make them suffer as they made him suffer. Instead, he weeps and he says, I am Joseph, right? Establishing the relationship, right? How's dad? Is my dad still alive? He doesn't say what they did was good. He doesn't pretend that evil wasn't evil, right? He doesn't get all of those years that he lost back somehow. But he does see the larger picture, right? God is not finished with us. God did not cause this evil, but neither could the evil defeat God. God gathered up what human beings had broken and somehow made a future out of those broken fragments. Reconciliation does not mean pretending the past didn't happen. That is not what Joseph did. Nor was it planned by God, right? All of the evil that happened. But it does mean believing that the past does not determine the future, and that God will somehow bring about reconciliation. And perhaps this is why the weeping matters so much, at least for me, because when Joseph finally sees his brothers, there is no grand theological speech. There is karma, right? There's none of that. He does not chastise. There's no debate. There is simply crying, embracing, kissing. And there is a family that now all of a sudden can start to talk to one another again. That final line, and the brothers began to speak, right? Words didn't come until all the weeping came out. And that, I think, friends, is what reconciliation is supposed to look like. It's not tidy, it's not sentimental, it's not easy. It looks like tears. Looks like snot. Looks like letting go of our need to be right, yeah? Laying down our insistence that we know exactly who to blame, and allowing God to do something in us and among us that we cannot accomplish by ourselves. None of us can become whole in isolation. None of us can do it by ourselves. Friends, it's been a fun ride for you all, this ride through Genesis. And many people have asked, why do we keep reading about all these broken and wretched humans doing terrible things to one another? And if you can't figure out why we are reading these things in church, I want you to come meet with me, okay? This is who we are. We're messy. We hurt each other. And we make big mistakes all the time. And then we're allowed to recreate with God and one another a future that looks different. And sometimes it starts with being a weepa,